Hey there, everyone, and welcome back to Don't Open That Door. Come along with our triumvirate of terror as we descend into darkness, hurtle into horror, and plunge into peril. If you've ever forgotten the combination to your locker, you're in the right place. I'm Justin, and the hills move in silence like lasagna.
I'm Nico, and Justin regularly bullies me.
Well, I'm Dan, and they don't call me the short message.
We're here today for something a little bit different. Dan, this is a first for the podcast, I think. What are we doing?
So we're actually doing a video game, and it's sort of our first. We did a live Let's Play of World of Horror a while ago, but this is the first of its kind that we're doing here. And yeah.
All right. Well, today we're reviewing Silent Hill, The Short Message. And before we get into it, I'm going to go ahead and cast out a little trigger warning here. This game deals heavily with themes of suicide, self-harm, and abuse. So if those topics aren't for you, we recommend you stay away from this one. But this game stars, and this is the English-speaking side of the cast, Jeannie Torado as Anita, Haruka Sakaguchi as the actual real-life person of Maya. There's like an actual model there. Anne Yatko as Maya's English voice, Brenda Arteaga Walsh as Amelie, and Larissa Gallagher as Anita's mother. So we open with Anita, a high school senior trapped in the Kettenstadt apartment complex. She goes through some hellish experiences while regaining the memory of her recent past, recent being like the last half a year or so. Specifically regarding Amelie, her best friend, and Maya, a local popular artist who's got some followers on social media. Anita believes that Maya is attempting to steal Amelie away from her. The first chapter of the game ends with Anita jumping from a rooftop to commit suicide, only to reawaken in the complex. Speaking of complex, Dan, you're a complex character. What happens next?
Sometimes. So throughout the course of the game, Anita comes to realize that she actually helped drive Maya to commit suicide, and she must come to terms with her own guilt from what she's done. Other than her own psyche, the main enemy and antagonist of the game is a monstrous tree creature named Sakura Head that fucks you up. It manifests itself based off of one of the major themes from Maya's artwork, which is cherry blossoms. Anita learns this from both notes she finds along her journey, as well as through her own investigation of the artwork that Maya left behind in the halls.
Nico, I know that you're for these streets, but the streets aren't in this one, but there are halls. So what happens next?
I do love a good hall reverb, usually my go-to, honestly. So eventually, Anita makes it to the site of Maya's final and most famous piece, where she then tries to take her life once again by jumping to her death. She then wakes back up, destined to continue to search the halls until she finds one last piece that Maya left for her. Throughout this time, she evades Sakura Head, searches through debris, and evades creepy masked mannequin men. Towards the end of her journey, we also learn that she had a troubled childhood herself, facing an abusive mother and isolation.
Speaking of isolation, if you want good sound isolation, my man Dan can hook you up. But Dan, why don't you close us out with this one?
So near the end here, Anita finds a pamphlet explaining the Silent Hill effect that seems to have taken over. She realizes that Maya actually considered her a friend and, quote, noticed her.
Senpai!
Despite what Anita thought earlier. She escapes to the complex and calls Amelie, I almost said Amelia, fuck.
Amelia Estevez.
She escapes the complex and calls Amelie, saying that she is a really shitty person, but she has to apologize to Maya and returns to jump off the building one final time. Thankfully, the wind blows her back and she sees that Amelie wants to chill with her tomorrow. The sky clears, showing that she escaped the Silent Hill effect. The end.
I just gotta say, at Notice Me, or at mention of the whole Notice Me Senpai thing, my friend C2A put out a trilogy of EPs that are prog rock, like heavenliness, that are all named Senpai and like have a story around like a traditional sort of like anime subplot. It also goes just very hard and is very silly, so go check that out. It's very good.
Well, let's go ahead and get right down to it, shall we? First, visuals. Nico, how's this game visualized for you?
I really like the way that it looks. You know, it's got sort of two sides to it, the way I think about it. It's got the visuals that we see of the real world, or at least the more realistic parts of the world that Anita is traveling through. And then we have the other worlds and all the other sort of visual aberrations that come with that sort of thematically. And I really think the presentation is very well done, both in terms of, you know, how we can use light and game design to sort of like help you find your way sometimes, but also just the sort of general vibe of the Kettenstadt building, as well as, I don't know, I just think Soccer Head's fucking cool as hell. So I'm a fan of the visuals.
Mm-hmm. Dan, visually, where are you at?
I have mixed feelings on this one.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the Kettenstadt building, and I really like the horror, Silent Hilly effects and that kind of side of it. But we kind of mentioned earlier, there's a couple like memories in the game where we see
Right.
Maya, and Maya is a real life actor or actress that they like filmed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I just don't really like that. I think it's so weird to see a real actor mixed, 10% of the time, but 90% of the time you're in video game Unreal Engine.
I agree with that.
I thought that was a weird mixture. And then Nico had just mentioned like playing with the light, and like you use your phone to kind of like shine light everywhere. And I don't really like that. I don't mind it as like a flashlight, but as you're like hustling through all these halls, you watch your phone like swinging wildly as your arm moves, but the light is just one static light right in the middle of the screen, and it doesn't make any sense to me. So I do really like the horror parts, but I don't like a lot of the other parts.
I will say two things. First, I've actually seen this before from Konami. They did this on Metal Gear Solid 4 because at the start of the chapters in that one, there would be this little kid cooking like eggs, and it would be like a real life video of an omelet being made at the start of each chapter. And they've also done it.
I always thought that looked good as hell.
Yeah. And they also did it, I think, in
Metal Gear Acid?
Yeah, something like that. And like if you got enough points or whatever, you could unlock little real life videos of like Gravure, however you fucking say it, scantily clad women in military outfits.
Gravure?
Which, okay, fine, I guess. But that game was hard as hell, by the way. That aside, I didn't mind it as much as Dan did, but what I did not like was, particularly during some of the maze sequences, there are parts that are not lit well at all.
Fucking dark.
It's so dark. And I'm already not the greatest with red light. And then like there's so much red light, which I would be okay with, but it's so dim. And then I promise you, there's a part of it, and we'll talk about the final maze chase later, but there's a part of it that I swear is almost pitch black. Like if you get to a certain point, you can barely see shit. And I'm just like, all right, bruh, this thing's going to come eat me now. So that was the downside of the visuals for me.
First it's going to fist you, then it's going to eat you.
Wow.
Yeah,
I mean,
it does.
I guess, yeah.
But the other side of it, I did, to Dan and Nico's point, like the Silent Hilly parts of it. And I also like the artwork. Like there was actually a person.
The artwork was really good. Even just like the regular ass graffiti.
Yeah, well, there was a
Yeah.
person, a real person who did that. And
I could tell.
yeah, their
I
name,
could absolutely
yeah,
tell.
their name was in the credits, but there was like a real actual artist who did that. And I thought that was pretty cool. Now, audio, Nico, I know you like the audio of this game.
I love the soundtrack. It is really reminiscent of the first 4 Silent Hill soundtracks, and they actually have 2 of the main members from Team Silence Audio team from that. And
Yes.
it is just such a huge benefit to this game. I've often said on the podcast how I think sound is arguably more important than visuals, and I think that both the way that Sakura Head sounds as well as the soundtrack and the sort of performances, for the most part, from the actors are all really good. The part that sort of bothers me was the delivery of Maya. So we have the actor, the actual human being, Haruka Sakaguchi, who we get a voiceover from via Ann Yatko, and just like, why? Because Maya's actor is delivering the lines in Japanese. We could have just had a Japanese voice with English subtitles, which we got anyway. So like, what was the point, Konami? What was the point? You already had it. Just keep it in.
Yeah, I agree with you. I really didn't like that. I think, and this isn't like an anime sub v dub debate, though, sub all the way, but I mean, like, if we're going to go that route, I almost kind of feel like, just like Nico said, have the voice there, because that just makes the most sense. It's kind of,
It's also like more work to get another voice actor. Not that I'm trying to be like, oh, fuck voice actors, but like, it would have been a simpler, artistic move to just keep that in.
I don't know. I disagree with that.
I kind of disagree with that.
You think so?
Well, I kind of disagree with that because there's other parts where there's a voice. I think specifically, and maybe this speaks to a larger issue with like putting like the real life people in it, but seeing the lips move, but then the audio not sync up it's more noticeable when it's a real person. And I hate that. This is coming for someone that watches like infinite amounts of like Godzilla and like old school, like kung fu dubs and stuff. And those are horrible. And I'm like, bruh, I'm not trying to do that like now. So Dan, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be weird to have 90% of the game in English and then 10% of the game in Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
And that would just be kind of odd to me. But overall, like Nico said, I love the soundtrack. I think it was really cool, atmospheric, but they usually also had some rhythmic elements that added like a groove kind of thing,
Yeah.
which was really, really cool. So overall, I'm actually a big fan of the audio.
All right. And this is a first for the podcast. So I'm just going to ask you for a thumbs up or a thumbs down. The controls. Does it get a thumbs up from you or a thumbs down? Nico, thumbs up or thumbs down for the controls?
Thumbs up for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Dan?
Yeah, control specifically, thumbs up, I think.
Mm-hmm. For me as well, although your boy had to invert the camera because those who know, but only real ones play with the invert y-axis. Now, let's go ahead and get to the themes of this game. And I want to lead with saying this game is not subtle in the slightest.
No.
Not at all.
This is arguably the least subtle thing we've ever reviewed, which is saying a lot.
I mean, the game literally tells you about like 8 times throughout the course of the game that if you have suicidal thoughts to contact the hotline, and they got the number right there. Like, it's really there. And I'm glad they do. I'm glad they have that there. But it's not subtle as what the themes are in this game whatsoever. Dan, why don't you kick off the themes for us?
How do you feel about them doing that? Like, they break immersion multiple times to put up the like warning screen. And like, I am totally in favor of doing it the first time, but I almost feel like the repeated mentioning of it just kind of breaks up the flow personally.
You might as well call me Echo, Nico, because I agree with you. I think they have it at the very, very, very beginning of the game, like when you start it up, and then they have it again when you start the game. And I'm like, okay, that's good enough for me personally. And like, maybe just whenever you start the game, they have that warning flash. Okay, cool. You get into it now. And I think once you're in it, I agree with you. It does kind of break up the flow a little bit. Dan?
This is again where I'm of mixed mind, because I personally agree with both of you. However, that being said, I don't suffer from those kind of thoughts and tendencies and things. And I think that this game doesn't just talk about suicide. The main protagonist, who you play as, commits suicide several times throughout the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that might be more powerful and everything than sort of talking about it or whatever. And the other times that they show you the message are after the character commits suicide.
Yes.
So I appreciate what they're doing. For me, it kind of broke me out of the game a little bit, but I'm wondering if it would make a big difference to somebody who does have those kind of thoughts.
I mean, perhaps I could see. I think people can only speak for themselves on this one, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know. True enough. So clearly suicide is a theme of this, in particular noted by Maya, who compares it to almost like a cherry blossom, because she's like, cherry blossoms, other things kind of wither and die, but not cherry blossoms, because they're bloom and when they fall, they're still beautiful. And she kind of wants to be like that at times. And then we learn that Maya does actually kill herself. So, that's kind of a thing. But what other themes are explored in this game, Nico?
So I would say the other main one is bullying, just because we see so much of it done to, well, not like directly done, but like indirectly done to both Anita and Maya. Mostly Anita, just because we have her perspective. But like one of the big things with Silent Hill is that a large part of how and why it manifests is through some kind of personal anguish, whether that's mental illness, family trauma, or something else. And in this case, the fact that Anita grew up in such a toxic environment and then, wasn't in a place where she was able to learn like healthy coping mechanisms and stuff, obviously has taken her down a road that is both less traveled upon and also just very, 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 very bad. So I don't really like, there's a lot to say about bullying, but there's like there's one part where you're going in the little high school hallway after doing a puzzle involving a locker, and there's just an army of like flashing silhouettes that are yelling at your character, and messages pop up like, stupid, ugly, fat whore, whatever. Like, and it's very melodramatic, and like I appreciate what they're doing, but it almost reads as like tragic comic at times.
Dan, I want to take this moment to introduce you here. Do you find the game to be overly melodramatic at times?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Without a question. I mean, I struggled with this because I think as I was playing the game was only about, let's say, 2 to 3 hours long.
About.
Yeah.
So it's short. So, for a video game that's very short, and compared to a movie that's long, but video game is short. So how do you remain subtle when still having such a long or such a short game? But I mean, like, you start off the game and you're in this place and you walk around, and the first locked door that you come to, you go, Anita says, I'm trapped here. I've been trapped my whole life. And I was like,
Yeah.
yo, really? And it's just like every time she's just like super over the top. And it's like, okay, I get it. Like, you don't have to like hit me over the head with all this every single conversation or anything. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
The followers thing is what killed me.
Oh my God.
Maya's got so many followers. Switches to her own profile, lost some more followers.
So that's one of the issues that I had with this game is every once in a while you get like the cell phone is a prominent part of the game. And every once in a while you get like a text or
Just like
phone
in Kingdom
call.
Hearts 3.
Oh. Sarah.
All right.
Sorry, I think we can find some ingredients here.
But
Would have made this game so much better.
every once in a while you're just walking around, something happens, and then you get a text from your friend Amelie, and she's like, hey, so are you going to go to college? Oh, why aren't you going to college? And I'm like, yo, this fucking monster just chased you down the hallway. Is this the appropriate time? And then like the followers.
That's why I'm not going to college.
Yeah, right. The followers thing you just mentioned, Justin, she literally, I think you've already committed suicide once or twice. You get to the top of the building, you find like this painting that is sort of the beautiful depiction of suicide that Maya has referenced. And you're like, damn, I'm a shitty person. You pull out your phone and you're like, wow, even after she died, she has more followers every day.
Yeah.
And I have less followers. Is this the time to think about this? Are you serious? Like, it was just really, really, it reads like a 40-year-old writing a game about the problems that teenagers have. And it's just like, oh, I'm going to make everything over the top and write as for teenagers because teenagers are too dumb to understand either one. And it's just like, I think teenagers, even if they are going through these things, I think it's a little more subtle or like, it's just over the top. I don't know.
Yeah, and what got me is there's ways to be subtle, even when, for example, you look at Maya's art and then Anita kind of says the people, she depicts cherry blossoms coming from their scars. to show that beauty can come and like people want to move forward, and it shows their desires, but a good chunk of that is never followed up on or touched on again, and it just doesn't ever happen that way. So I was kind of questioning about that too. And also, real quick, I forgot to say this for the audience. The way this game works, it's a first person walking simulator where you basically walk around the apartment complex and the sections are locked. You're essentially in hallways. Sometimes it's rooms, and you can explore around, but you have to find the notes and the pictures the game wants you to find. And then you go to the next section, and they're broken up by chase sequences wherein Sakura Head just chases you down, and you got to hit him with a, like the spin move or whatever you can do to get away and get over to the next place. So that's the gameplay, and that's why we're saying what we're saying, because a large portion of the game, the point is the narrative. There's not a crazy amount of gameplay to speak on aside from the chase sequences.
So I don't know if this is a common phrase, so forgive me if I'm just living under a rock, but I've never heard a first person game be called a walking simulator.
Oh no, that is a thing.
Really?
Yeah. It's 100% a thing. It's very common within horror video games, actually.
Isn't that just first person? What's the difference between first person and a walking simulator?
Specifically, a walking simulator is a game where you are deprived of most other mechanics. Otherwise, you might be thinking of like a first person shooters where you have a full like sort of narrative toolkit as well as just like a set of abilities that you can do, but like in this, literally all you can do is like walk and interact with stuff. And specifically within horror video games, which this is like playing to a very obvious lineage of, in this particular like subgenre, it's meant to, one, make you feel more vulnerable, and two, like Justin was saying, really constrict you to just the narrative and nothing else, really.
Got you.
And given that, I ask you both, who is this game for? Who is the audience for this game? Is it a bunch of ever-aging millennials? Who's it for?
So I'll go ahead and answer right away. It's me. I am the audience here. So this is the first Silent Hill game in almost 10 years. The last time we got a real Silent Hill property was with PT back in 2014. And speaking
that was a demo.
But it was, well, okay, not a full property, but just like anything Silent Hill was
big up. Agreed.
So I have been a fan of Silent Hill for as long as I'd known that it existed, and getting another look at it in this sort of really unique for the series, with the exception of PT, like it is, I'm not going to say it's a breath of fresh air because it's not, but it's just really nice to get something that is, while I think in terms of presentation, very polished, but still otherwise a little bit unsubtle, to put it kindly. I am the target audience. Like Silent Hill fans in general are the target audience, because like we already vibe with this kind of stuff, with the setting and everything, and arguably like prestige horror in video game form type shit. So like, yeah.
Actually, and I did want to ask you about this. First off, just how does this stack up to other Silent Hill games just as a game?
So insofar as there's only, again, one other sort of thing in the Silent Hill restaurant of games, if you want to put it that way. I don't know why you would. That's just the word that came to mind. It is, in terms of vibes, spot on. It really reminds me of the first four, which is when we had that sort of golden era before we had the takeover from Western developers that made it much more like action-based. And having this much more of a subtle psychological horror, well, not subtle, but like less violent psychological horror as opposed to more like slashery stuff, I think is really cool. But it's obviously not as deep or polished as any of the first four games. But for what it is, I really like it, despite all of its like kooky flaws. That's just me. And I know that there are a lot of people online who disagree with me. This is just the opinion of one person.
I was going to say, I think that there's a lot of Silent Hill fans out there, from just what I've read on random places, kind of split. There's half of them that kind of side with you, and then
Mhm.
there's another half that's like, get this teenage angst out my Silent Hill.
Which I
And
really get because like I cannot emphasize enough how much they truly beat you over the head with this.
agreed. Now, Dan, I want to talk to you real quick, and Nico, please feel free to chime in as well, because I think this is a little bit of a pain point for everyone. So you're going through the game, you're going through the narrative, you go through the chase sequences, and right when you think you're right about done, there's one more chase sequence, the final boss, if you will. Dan, can you describe this chase sequence and any issues you may have had with it?
So you're running down a bunch of corridors that are changing, and a lot of them are very dark. So,
Mhm.
like Justin had mentioned before, and you can't really see where you're going. And you have to find these, what, 4 or 5 like pictures,
5.
Yes.
5 pictures that each one unlocks like a different lock that's on a door. Then you have to find the door, and then you get out. Problem is that's not explained, that you have to find pictures. So at first you're just kind of running around, no idea what to do. Then eventually you figure it out. But it's so hard. I don't know if you're hearing the ice cream
Ice
truck.
cream? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Carry
thank
on.
God. I thought we were about to
Nico
descend
and I,
into
like-
the other world.
Speaking of Silent Hill.
Fucking walls start peeling back.
But yeah, so you're just running through, and it's just really hard to remember where you're going. You're being chased by this monster. You got to remember which turns, and it's this big ass maze, super dark. It's one of the most frustrating video game experiences out there. And I mean, I think I died like 3 or 4 times before, and got like almost nowhere before I was like, okay, I'm just gonna look this up. And
Yeah.
cards on the table, I looked up a YouTube video on how to do it, and I still died like 2 or 3 times while like doing that.
Same.
And then finally I just won, and I was like, dude, fuck this. I almost just was like, all right, I'm just gonna watch somebody playing this on YouTube till the end. Like, I'm not even gonna beat the game myself. But I did. So yeah.
Fair play. I had a very similar experience with it, and I what really got me about it is it seems to be difficult for no reason. And the type of difficulty that it is not really like a skill-based thing. Like, for example, if you were playing a fighting game, so you've honed your skills, your combos, and then the final boss is a big test of that, right?
The final
Like-
boss is just Lex Luthor from Injustice with his bullshit overhead axes.
Hey, fuck you. And I'll say that it's like this game, it would have made sense if there was like a puzzle to solve or if there was something else, but instead you get this fucking maze that you got to run around at 100 miles an hour. The monster warps. It actually warps. If it gets far enough behind you, if you get away from it, it'll just warp ahead of you again. And it's like, come on, man. Like, this is infuriating for no reason. And it seems like just a really odd gate to place to stop the player from getting the rest of the narrative, when up to this point, it's been an almost difficultyless narrative. And then all of a sudden, it's like, bam, hit you with it. I'm like, all right, bro, come on. Nico?
Yeah, no, the ending part was the hardest section by far. I had the similar, or the exact, not similar, the exact experience of Utan. Like, I looked up a tutorial for it, and then, like, I watched it, and as soon as I got into this cavalcade of fuckery, I was like, oh, I don't remember a single thing I just watched. Fuck me. Okay. And I just ended up running around anyway, and, like, I got lucky on my final try, and for what it's worth, you can get through this game like fairly quick if you are either lucky or know what you're doing. There are let's plays of this that I've seen go to like an hour and a half. So like there is a chance to do it with some level of quickness faster than we did, but like probably not on your first try.
No, I wouldn't say so. But what I would say is, let's talk about the what would you do. So this is kind of an interesting thing for what would you do because it's a game, so we can do what we would do. But
Yeah.
I will say this, and this is kind of, I guess, different. And this is kind of a deep topic. But would you blame Anita for what she did to Maya? Do you consider her to be villainous, evil, bad? worthy of
I mean,
redemption?
she's shitty, yeah, but I think she is worthy of redemption. At the same time, she's just gonna need a lot of introspection and a lot of therapy.
I agree. I'm right there with you. Same.
Like, she's not a good person. Don't get it twisted. I don't like Anita as a character, but I think that she can be redeemed, yes.
See, I actively hated Anita with a
I
passion.
understand.
Mm-hmm.
I get
Like,
it, man.
I hate her so much. And even though
If she
the
didn't
game
narrate every single goddamn thing, like, we aren't capable of putting the dots together ourselves, like, I would have so much kinder of an opinion towards her. But, like, oh my fucking god, it is endless.
And speaking to that, just real quick, Anita's mom, via abuse, kills her brother and then stuffs him in like a freezer. And Anita runs away and tells, like social services. And I almost wish that hadn't been so presented to us in that way. And I wish it had been more subtle. And that would have been something really cool to piece together.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, one thing the game does let you piece together is that Maya was pregnant, which that's cool. Not cool that she's pregnant, but it's
In a game about ending life, they talk about creating life. That's sick, dude.
Wake me up!
no. I mean, it's cool that the game
Wake me up inside.
didn't
Like,
feel the
hell.
need to hold my hand through that, because we see a guy, like drawings of a guy that Maya has, which is interesting because she said she was only interested in drawing girls. But then there's a guy that she draws, and then they talk about him a little bit, and then he's gone, and we see a pregnancy test. That's cool. I like when those details, again, not cool in that respect, but it's cool when the game doesn't hold your hand and leaves the details for you to kind of figure out for yourself. And I wish there was more of that, because at least in that case, if there's things for me to piece together, at least my brain is working on it while I'm walking through here mashing X to find the next thing I need to click on. So that. But Anita, I disliked her greatly because, I'm sorry, man, but how childish do you have to be like, taking my best friend away from me, when like the whole time your friend is texting you, worried about you, and it's like, oh, I'm gonna lose my best friend. Like, nah, if you lose your best friend, that's on you, because it's not Maya's fault. And people can be friends with more than one person. I don't know how else to break this to you.
Yeah.
And we even see from Anita's perspective that, like, when they first met Maya, they kind of snuck up on her in one of her studio sessions. And apparently the apartment complex was a lot cleaner back then. And
Yeah.
literally, Maya walks up and she's like, oh, you're so awesome. Your glasses are cute. And Anita's like, she doesn't even notice me. I'm nothing like her. And then all of a sudden you see that in a somewhat predictable twist, when you saw how the mural or graffiti of Amelie was, that I figured that Maya was going to be, sorry, not Maya. I figured that Anita was going to be on the other side of that.
Yeah.
So that is that. Now, where do you guys think this ranked on, not Rotten Tomatoes, but Metacritic? Where do we think it sits there?
I was wondering what you're going to pull here for the source.
I'm going to say like a 40.
I'm going to be a little optimistic and say like 64.
You know what's interesting? Oh my God, that's very close. So first and foremost, I got to say this is interesting because Metacritic's critic score is given on a scale from 1 to 100, but the user score is given on a scale from 1 to 10. I've never seen anything like that before
Why?
from one publication. Either way, Dan, you lose. Nico, you win. This has a 53 as a kind of score on Metacritic. And the user score is 6.3 or 63 out of 100. So, Nico, you win there too. But I want to get your thoughts. What score would you give this game? Just 1 or 2 sentences for general thoughts.
I am gonna start us off here with probably the kindest opinion here. This hits a sweet spot for me. I love this franchise, and it has a lot of like personal meaning to me in my own journey of like not only horror but media in general. Silent Hill has been a big part of like sort of my own, I don't want to say life, but just my growth as someone who just like consumes more stuff. Like so many things have been compared to the first, like again, 4 games, arguably the first 2 really are the most important, but like just getting something that is in that sort of ballpark for me, it already bumps it up like a lot more than I arguably should. But I am going to give this a 79. There are a
Wow.
lot of problems with this game. There's a lot of problems with this game, but for me, like the good outshines the bad, and particularly because this is free and again only like 2 to 3 hours, I think it's worth your time.
I'm going to take I'm going to take a slightly different approach here and say that I think the bad outweighs the good. All in all, I think there's a lot of problems with this game. And I've said this before, but despite, I guess, talking about deep things, just because you're talking about important things doesn't mean your game is important. And this could have been better. Honestly, the writing let this down tremendously. I'm going to give this, honestly, like a 48. And to be blunt, you will find yourself with a much better experience. If you want horror, if you can get the PT demo, because it's not really a thing anymore, but if you can play it, it's awesome. But if not, Resident Evil 7 is a great, great, great horror first-person experience. And if you want something that touches on different themes and is a deep story that might make you think, Gone Home. Check that out. I watched Dan play that way back in the day, and it touched something in my deep, 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 dark heart. So yeah.
I fucking hate this game.
I
This wasn't it. As like the other two have said, there's a lot of problems. We spent most of the episode ranting about it, and in a game that is 99%, there's like no gameplay, very, very little gameplay. It's 99% plot, and for the plot to be that shit, like if the game is the plot, your plot can't be that shit. And I think like the writing was just bad. There, like you guys have said, there's no subtlety, and I don't know, man. It's just really, really frustrating. And at the end of the game, I was really trying to figure out what the message behind the game was, because at the end, you win, you don't commit suicide, you get saved by your friend, whatever. But I'm trying to figure out like what is the game trying to say, if anything, about that. And like, because at the end, she says, "I'm a really shitty person," and then she's saved. And like, I don't like nothing her friends have done are different. Nothing that she has done is different, aside from realize that she's a really shitty person. And I don't really like, I'm clearly missing something, but I don't think that's a very clearly a very good message to be putting out there for when talking about like suicide and shit. And like Justin said, I just think that there's, just because the game touches on or doesn't even touch on it is about heavy and important things doesn't make it important. I'm gonna go the opposite of Nico. He gave it a 79. I'm giving it a 21.
Woo! Damn!
Welcome to Dan's lowest score that he's ever given something on the podcast.
Maybe.
And Dan, one other thing I got to point out,
One of them, yeah.
Amelie might be dead.
Yeah, so there's this whole so we've talked about how you find kind of story points in like notes and things that are left behind. And there's one note. Well, Amelie like wants to go to college and she's studying really, really hard. And we see this in multiple notes, but her parents start arguing and she doesn't have a great family relationship, family dynamic there. But at the end, Amelie is kind of the one who, like, quote unquote, saves you, sort of, kind of. And then it's shown that Amelie and Anita both go to college. Okay, cool. However, there's one note that you find that talks about an 18-year-old girl who commits suicide. It's like from the news. And even though she got into college and she was super happy with that, she had a poor family dynamic and killed herself because of it. And I'm like, wait, is that not Amelie? Like, and at the point that you find that note, you're going through the game in Amelie's room, in her house, in her school desks and lockers and things. Yeah, in high school. And that's the same thing you did with Maya, who's dead. And it, like, the game very seriously points you, or at least for me, led me to believe that Amelie was dead, but she's clearly not. And I don't understand that.
Yeah, I will agree. That is a somewhat frustrating point because you're correct in that you would hope that there would be some kind of, whether it's redemption or something with Anita, but instead, because I mean, Maya, the ghost of Maya or whoever texts you is like, find it, find it, find it. And then you do find it. You find the picture that she had of her to realize that, she was noticed. And then it's like, well, what was the point?
But
Because it didn't
but
matter.
Maya and Anita have been like good friends throughout, I don't know how long, but like you have
Yeah.
all these memories of Maya talking about how you're friends together and all this kind of stuff. So like why does there have to be a picture to go, "Oh wow, she noticed me." Well, no
Yeah.
shit she noticed you. Like you've been
And
friends. Good
I will
friends.
say, I will say this too, and this is just, I'm really sorry, my last thing to say. The way it's presented and the problem I had is that you enter with, again, an unreliable narrator, specifically Anita, and Anita doesn't have memories of anything, and she starts with the premise that, oh, Maya's trying to take my friend away and she's bad. But when you see the photos, when you pick them up, you come to realize like these are actual quotes. Maya was like, "Oh, you're actually not bad. Like, stop thinking you are. You're way too hard on yourself. We can audit an art class together. You can be better." But these are things that you would remember. So my thought process is this. Honestly, you know what? I'm wrong. Maybe Anita is dead too, and she's just in purgatory.
So that's one thing I was thinking too.
I think she is.
Oh, we all agree then. All right, sick.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too for a while. I don't know.
Yeah, because that's the only thing I can think of, because it would make sense if she was dead too, because then the whole memory loss thing makes a lot more sense. And a dead friend calling her makes a lot more sense too. So maybe. I don't know. To wrap this all up, is this one recommended? 1, 2, 3.
Hell
No.
no.
I would, but I have a question for the three of us rather. Would you recommend that the listener just watch a Let's Play?
No.
No.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
Again,
Go.
the game is like very little gameplay, so like a Let's Play and playing it, the actual game, are very similar.
Yeah.
All right.
There you go. So this one is not recommended from us here on the pod. And let us know your thoughts. We're on X and Instagram at DOTD Horror. We're on Facebook. Don't open that door. Plus, catch everything we've done on our website, which is dotdhorror.com. But till next time, I always say this, take care of one another. I'm dead ass about that.
Poor choice of words.
Okay. Definitely, reach out if you've got negative thoughts or thoughts of self-harm. Definitely reach out and get some help. But as always, dear listener, don't open that door. Bye.